At 2 in the morning, a 58-year-old woman sat on a cracked plastic bench in a Charlotte bus terminal with $17 in her coat pocket. A sleeping 10-year-old boy curled against her ribs, and a brass key shaped like a falcon's head pressing into her palm so hard it left a red imprint that would not fade for hours. She did not know it yet, but in less than 36 hours she would kneel on a dusty cabin floor and weep at what her grandmother had hidden for 25 years. She did not know that the quiet old man chopping firewood at the edge of a Blue Ridge clearing had been waiting a quarter century for her to arrive. She did not know that the brother who had refused her a place to sleep would track her into those mountains with a lawyer and a lie. All she knew in that fluorescent-lit terminal was that her grandson was shivering, that the heater above their bench had been broken for hours, and that she had nowhere left in the world to go. If stories like this one move you, if you believe that the love we leave behind can outlast the years, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and stay with us until the very end. What this grandmother finds behind a sealed mountain door will change everything you believe about second chances. Now settle in, dim the lights, and let the story begin. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield, though for 58 years almost everyone had called her Nora. She had been a third-grade teacher in Raleigh for 31 years, the kind of teacher who kept letters from former students in a shoebox under her bed and remembered every name. She had been a wife for 34 years to a quiet electrician named Walter, who liked black coffee and bluegrass radio, and who died one Tuesday morning in March with a half-eaten piece of toast still on the kitchen counter. She had been the mother of one son, Daniel, who married a kind woman named Rebecca, and together they had given her Caleb. Then, 18 months after Walter's funeral, a logging truck crossed a center line on Highway 64. And Daniel and Rebecca were gone too, and Nora became a grandmother, raising a grandson alone in a house she could no longer afford. The medical bills came first. Walter had been uninsured for the last 7 months of his life because they had been trying to save money. The hospital wanted $94,000. The funeral home wanted $11,000 more. Then Daniel and Rebecca's debts came due because someone had to pay them, and Nora was the only one left to sign anything. She cashed in her teacher's pension. She sold Walter's truck, his tools, her mother's silver, the upright piano in the front room that Daniel had learned Heart and Soul on when he was 7. She kept Caleb's bedroom intact for as long as she could, because the boy had already lost too much, and a child should at least have his own bed. The foreclosure notice came on a Thursday in late September. She had 30 days. She used 28 of them, calling every relative, every old friend, every social service number listed in the back of the phone book. The shelters were full. The waiting list ran into spring. Her sister in Phoenix said she was sorry, but the spare room was being remodeled. Her cousin in Virginia did not call back. And then on the 29th day, she called her younger brother, Marcus, who lived in a 4-bedroom house in suburban Charlotte, and who had not visited their mother once during the last year of her illness. The phone call had lasted 90 seconds. "Marcus, it's me. I need help just for a few weeks." "Nora, you know I'd love to, but Diane and I have the boys home from college, and the guest room is being used as Diane's office now. And frankly, we just don't have the bandwidth right now. You understand?" "It's not just me, it's Caleb. He's 10. "I know how old he is. Listen, have you tried the Salvation Army? They have programs." She had hung up before she said something she could not take back. 2 days later, she packed 2 duffel bags, took Caleb's hand, and walked out of the only house her grandson had ever known. They rode a greyhound to Charlotte because she thought foolishly that being closer to Marcus might soften him. It did not. She had stood on his porch in the rain for 40 minutes before she understood he was not going to open the door, even though she could see his shadow behind the curtain. That was how Eleanor Whitfield ended up in a bus terminal at 2 in the morning with a sleeping boy against her side and no plan past sunrise. She had not slept in 3 nights. Her eyes burned. The fluorescent lights hummed at a pitch that made her molars ache. A janitor pushed a mop across the tile floor in slow hypnotic arcs. A vending machine cycled its compressor on and off. Somewhere down the corridor, a woman was crying quietly into a payphone, and Nora did not look toward the sound, because she understood that grief like dignity was something a person should be allowed to keep private. She reached into the inner pocket of her old wool coat. She had been carrying it there for 19 days ever since she had cleaned out the cedar chest at the foot of her bed for the last time. A small canvas pouch the color of dried tea tied with a leather cord that had gone brittle with age. She had not opened it. She had been afraid to. She did not know exactly why. She untied the cord now because she had finally arrived at the place her grandmother had spoken of, the place where there was nothing left to lose. Inside the pouch was a brass key heavy as a river stone with a handle cast in the shape of a falcon's head. Its eyes two tiny chips of green glass that caught the fluorescent light and held it. Beside the key was a folded square of parchment soft as cloth from being folded so many times. And beneath the parchment a letter sealed with old wax that had cracked but not broken. Nora's hands trembled as she lifted the letter free. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, looping, patient. The script of a woman who had learned to write in another country, in another language before English had ever crossed her tongue. To my Eleanor, to be opened only when there is nowhere left to go. She had been 23 years old when her grandmother Marguerite had pressed this pouch into her hands. It had been October of 1999, and Marguerite had been dying of a slow pneumonia in a sun-yellow bedroom in a small house outside Asheville. The rest of the family had gathered like crows over the will. Marguerite's two sons had argued about the city house. Her daughters-in-law had taken turns inventorying the silver. The mountain cabin 3 hours north, the one nobody had visited in years, had been dismissed as worthless by everyone but Nora, who had not asked for anything at all. On her last clear afternoon, Marguerite had called Nora into the bedroom alone. She had taken Nora's young hands in her thin, papery ones, and she had spoken in the low, urgent voice of a woman entrusting a secret across a span of years she would not live to see. Eleanor, listen to me now because I will not say this twice. You have a soft heart. The world will try to teach you that is a weakness. The world will be wrong, but it will hurt you anyway. And there will come a day when you have given everything you have to people who did not deserve it, and you will find yourself with nothing. When that day comes, take this pouch. Go to the cabin. The key opens everything. But promise me, my Eleanor, do not break the seal before it is time. Some doors only open when you have lost everything else. Promise me. She had promised. She had been 23 and she had thought her grandmother was speaking from the fevers of illness. She had tucked the pouch into the bottom of her hope chest, and over the years she had moved it from house to house with her, and she had almost forgotten what it was. Almost. Now in the bus terminal, with her grandson's small head heavy against her shoulder, Nora broke the wax seal. The letter was 3 pages long, written on the back of butcher paper. Because Marguerite had never wasted anything, Nora read it twice in the buzzing light, and the second time her vision blurred so badly she had to wipe her eyes with the heel of her hand to finish it. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I was right, and I am sorry I was right. I have watched you since you were a baby. I have seen the shape of your spirit. You give. You give and you give, and you do not know how to stop. And there are people in our family, my own children among them, who will take from you until the well runs dry. I could not save you from that, but I could prepare a place for you to land. The cabin is yours. It has always been yours, even when the others said it was not worth the taxes. I paid those taxes for 25 years from an account they did not know existed. I kept it sealed. I kept it waiting. Inside you will find everything you need to begin again. Trust the key. Trust the map. Trust that I loved you across all of these years, and that love does not stop simply because a heart does. Bring the child if there is a child. There will be room. There will be warmth. There will be a door, and the key will fit. And you will know what to do when the door opens. All my love always. Your grandmother, Marguerite. Caleb stirred against her side. He had her son's eyelashes and her son's small, serious mouth. And when he opened his eyes, he looked for one breath-stopping second exactly like Daniel at that age. "Grandma, why are you crying?" She pressed the letter against her chest. She found that she was smiling through the tears and that she did not entirely understand why. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I think I just figured out where we're going next." "Where?" She held the key up between them. The falcon's head caught the light. The green glass eyes glittered. "To your great-grandmother's cabin. In the mountains. A place she saved for us a long time ago when you and I didn't even know we'd need it." He studied the key with the solemn attention of a child who has learned too young that adults sometimes need to be believed. "Is it far?" "Yes, but we can get there." "Is it safe?" She hesitated. She had promised herself the morning Daniel died that she would never again lie to this boy about anything that mattered. "I don't know yet, but I think your great-grandmother thought it would be, and she was a woman who knew things." He nodded slowly. He reached out one finger and touched the falcon's beak. "It looks like a bird." "It is a bird, a falcon. She used to tell me they fly higher than any other bird and they always find their way home." He considered this with the seriousness it deserved, and then he laid his head back against her shoulder and closed his eyes because he had decided, in the way children decide these things, to trust her. She walked to the ticket counter at 3:15 in the morning. The clerk was a tired woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Delphine. Nora asked for 2 tickets to Asheville, and Delphine punched the keys and said it would be $48. Nora opened her wallet. It was not there. She checked the other pocket, the inside flap, the small zippered compartment where she had kept the folded bills. She checked the coat. She checked the duffel bag at her feet. She checked with rising panic the bench where they had been sitting, even though she already knew with the cold certainty that comes only at 3 in the morning, that the wallet was gone. She remembered then the man who had bumped against her at the vending machine an hour before. Apologetic, distracted, already walking away by the time she had turned to say it was all right. $47. She had had $47 and a debit card to an account that contained $11.16. Now she had $17 in the coat pocket, where she had kept emergency cash. $17 and a key. Her knees went soft. She braced one hand against the counter. Delphine watched her with the quiet, unsurprised compassion of a woman who had seen every kind of trouble cross her counter for decades. "Honey, you all right?" "I'm fine. I just need a minute." She walked back to the bench. She sat down very carefully the way a person sits when they are not sure their body will obey them. Caleb was awake now, watching her. He had his backpack on his lap. He unzipped the top pocket and pulled out a small ceramic pig painted blue with a coin slot in the back. The paint was chipped along one ear. "Grandma, we can use this." She stared at him. She could not speak. "Daddy gave it to me when I was 7. He said it was for emergencies. I think this is an emergency." She took the pig in both hands. It rattled, not full, not even half full, but not empty either. "Caleb, honey, that's yours. That's from your daddy. Daddy said it was for emergencies. He'd want you to have it." She broke then the way a dam breaks, quietly, without drama. She bent her head over the small blue pig and her grandson's small steady hands, and she wept the kind of tears that come from a place beneath language. The place where grief and gratitude live in the same room and have nothing to say to each other. The pig held $31.60, mostly in quarters and won ones. Combined with her 17, it was just enough for 2 one-way tickets to Asheville and a packet of crackers from the vending machine to share between them on the long ride north. Delphine slid the tickets across the counter at 3:40 in the morning. She did not say anything about the tear tracks on Nora's face. She only pressed a paper cup of coffee into Nora's hand without being asked, and she did not charge for it. Bus leaves at 5:50. You ladies sit tight. Thank you, truly. Honey, we all need a hand sometimes. The ride to Asheville took 6 hours. Nora watched the world change through the smeared bus window. The flat sprawl of Charlotte gave way to rolling farmland, then to foothills patched in the first burning colors of October. Caleb pressed his face against the glass and named the trees as they passed the way Daniel had taught him: maple, hickory, sweet gum, yellow birch. She held the falconhead key in her closed fist for most of the ride. The brass warmed against her skin until it felt almost alive. From the Asheville depot, they took a smaller shuttle bus that ran twice a day along the old logging road network up into the Blue Ridge. The driver was a heavy-set man in his 50s named Earl, who chewed sunflower seeds and listened to a country station turned low. Nora showed him the hand-drawn map and he squinted at it for a long time. Mile marker 23. That's old Hawthorne land back in there. Ain't nobody been up that holler in years. You sure that's where you're headed, ma'am? I'm sure. It's 4 miles in off the road. I know. He looked at Caleb. He looked back at her. He did not ask any more questions. He chewed his sunflower seeds and put the shuttle in gear. At mile marker 23, he led them off at the head of a fire road choked with goldenrod and the first fallen leaves of the season. He gave Nora a bottle of water from a cooler under his seat. He told her the shuttle came back through every Tuesday and Friday at 11 a.m. in case she needed to come out. She thanked him. She did not tell him she did not plan on coming out. They walked. The fire road climbed gently for the first mile, then more steeply switching back along the shoulder of a wooded ridge. The afternoon air smelled of damp leaves and wood smoke from somewhere far away. A pileated woodpecker hammered in the canopy. Caleb walked ahead of her. His small back straight, his small shoulders set against the weight of his backpack. And Nora watched him and thought, he is 10 years old and he is leading me into a forest because I have nowhere else to take him. And I do not deserve this child's trust. And I will spend every day I have left trying to earn it. At the second mile, her left ankle began to ache where she had twisted it years ago slipping on icy church steps. She did not stop. At the third mile, Caleb began to lag and she took his backpack and carried it on top of her own without saying anything. And he let her without saying anything. The trees grew taller. The light grew more amber. The road narrowed until it was barely a path. It was at the fourth mile, just as they crested a rise, where the trail curled around the base of an enormous tulip poplar, that they smelled wood smoke that was no longer distant. Then they heard the chopping, steady, rhythmic, the sound of a sharp axe striking seasoned wood. Nora put her hand on Caleb's shoulder. They came around the curve of the trail together, and they saw him. He was an old man, perhaps in his early 70s, lean and weathered, with hair the color of wood smoke pulled back into a short tail at the nape of his neck. He wore a faded red flannel and canvas pants worn pale at the knees. He stood beside a chopping block at the edge of a small clearing, splitting cordwood with the unhurried economy of a man who had been splitting wood for 60 years. A short-handled axe rose and fell. The pieces fell away cleanly. He stopped mid-swing. He had heard them or sensed them before they made a sound. He set the axe down across the block. He turned slowly. His eyes were the color of river ice. He looked at Nora for a long moment without speaking. His gaze traveled across her face the way a man reads a letter he has been expecting for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and roughened by years but steady. You have her eyes. Nora could not find her own voice. She felt Caleb step closer against her hip. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. My name is Silas Hawthorne. I live just over that ridge. I've kept an eye on this place for 25 years come November. I don't understand. He looked down at her closed fist, the one that had held the brass key for 600 miles. He looked up again. Something moved across his weathered face that might have been a smile or might have been the beginning of tears, or might have been both. Your grandmother told me you'd come. She didn't know when. But she said you'd come, and she said I'd know you the moment I saw you, and she was right on both counts. Marguerite was right about most things in the end. The name struck Nora like a hand against her chest. She had not heard anyone speak her grandmother's name aloud in years. She had not known there was anyone left who would. You knew her. I knew her. How? He looked past her then into the trees, into the long deep slant of the late afternoon light. He looked the way a man looks across the surface of a lake when he is remembering someone who used to swim in it. That's a longer story than the daylight we've got left. The cabin's just down through those firs. You two have walked a long way. Let's get that door open before the sun goes. He picked up his axe. He started down the path ahead of them without looking back. And after a moment, because there was nothing else to do, Nora and Caleb followed him. The cabin came into view between the trees the way a face comes into view across a crowded room. 2 stories of cedar logs gone silver with weather, a deep covered porch, a river stone chimney, boards nailed across every window in neat, careful rows. 3 heavy iron chains looped across the front door, each fastened with a padlock the size of a man's fist. Nora stopped at the edge of the clearing. Caleb stopped beside her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. It was Caleb who spoke first in the small, clear voice of a child who is trying to be brave for someone he loves. "Grandma, what's inside?" She did not know how to answer him. She climbed the 3 porch steps. The wood was solid beneath her feet, sound as the day it had been laid. She drew the falcon head key from her pocket. The brass had warmed against her body all day. The green glass eyes caught the last gold of the sun slipping behind the ridge. She fitted the key to the first padlock. It turned smoothly and sweetly, as if it had been waiting all these years to be asked. The lock fell open with a soft, heavy click that seemed in the deep mountain silence louder than any sound she had ever heard. She moved to the second lock. It opened the same way. She moved to the third. Behind her, she could hear Silas Hawthorne's slow, even breathing. She could feel Caleb's small hand take hold of the hem of her coat. The third lock was older. It resisted. She had to wiggle the key, lean her weight against it. For one terrible moment, she thought it would not turn at all. Then, with a deep, grinding sigh, it gave. The 3 chains fell away from the door and pooled on the porch boards with a sound like distant thunder. Nora set both hands flat against the heavy oak. She drew a breath that went all the way down to a place she had not been able to reach in months. She pushed. The door swung inward on hinges that had not moved in 25 years. A long, slow exhalation of cool air came out to meet her, smelling of cedar and dried lavender and old paper. And something else, something faint and impossibly familiar. The ghost of a perfume she had not smelled since she was 23 years old, and her grandmother had pressed a brass key into her palm and made her promise to wait. The light was failing behind her. The cabin's interior was a deep waiting dark. From somewhere inside that dark, just at the edge of hearing, came a small sound that should not have been possible. A sound like the soft, distinct chime of a clock striking the hour. Caleb's hand tightened on her coat. "Grandma." She could not move. She could not speak. She stood on the threshold of her grandmother's 25-year promise, and she listened to the impossible clock count out its measure in the dark. And she understood with a certainty that bypassed every rational thought that she was not going to be the only one waiting for her on the other side of that door. The sound came again as Nora crossed the threshold. A single bronze note, deep and unhurried, with a long tail of resonance that traveled the dark rooms and came back to her, thinned and changed. She did not move. She let her eyes adjust. Silas had stepped onto the porch behind them, and she could feel the patient weight of his presence at her back. But he did not speak, and she was grateful for it, because she understood that whatever was waiting in this house was meant to greet her first. "Grandma, there's a clock." Caleb's voice was small but steady. He was pointing into the deep shadow of the front room toward the wall opposite the door. Nora fumbled in her coat pocket for the small penlight she had carried for 6 weeks. The beam was weak. It caught dust suspended in the cold air like a slow rain that had forgotten how to fall. It found the clock. It stood between two shrouded armchairs. A tall case of dark walnut, taller than a man, with a brass pendulum the size of a dinner plate swinging in slow, steady arcs behind its glass door. The face was painted porcelain, the numerals Roman, the hands bronze and delicate as the hands of a woman who had loved the work of making them. The pendulum caught the penlight beam and threw it back in pale gold. It was running. After 25 years of locked doors and boarded windows, it was running. That isn't possible. She heard her own voice from a great distance. Silas came forward then quietly, the way a man enters a church. He stopped beside her shoulder. He did not touch her. 8-day movement, self-winding of the pendulum drop. Marguerite's father built it in 1912 when he was still in the old country. He told her it would never stop as long as the house stood. She believed him. So I came up here every Sunday for the first 10 years and gave it a touch just in case. After that, I stopped coming. I figured if he was wrong, he was wrong. I guess he wasn't. The clock chimed the half hour, a single softer note that seemed to settle the dust rather than disturb it. Caleb let go of her coat and walked slowly toward the clock. He stood before it with his hands at his sides, looking up at the swinging pendulum the way another child might have looked up at a horse for the first time. It sounds like a heartbeat. Nora pressed her hand to her own chest and found that her heart had slowed to match. She lit the kerosene lantern Silas drew from a peg beside the door. She had not known he was carrying matches. She found as the evening unfolded that he was carrying a great many small useful things in the deep pockets of his canvas coat, and that he produced each of them without comment. The way a man returns borrowed tools to a neighbor's shed without needing to mention them. He set a tinderbox on the kitchen counter. He set a stub of beeswax candle on the dining table. He laid a folded square of waxed paper beside the candle, which proved when she opened it later to contain a thick slice of dark bread and a wedge of hard cheese wrapped in cloth. He did not stay long that first night. He told her where the well pump was and how it needed priming with a jug of water kept in the mudroom for that purpose. He told her the wood box on the back porch was full and the chimney had been swept 11 months ago. He told her there were clean sheets in the cedar chest at the top of the stairs and that the bed in the smaller upstairs room would be the easiest to make up before full dark. He told her his cabin was over the ridge to the east, 3/4 of a mile by the deer path, and that if she put a lamp in the kitchen window, he would see it from his porch and come. Then he touched the brim of an invisible hat and walked back out into the dusk, and Nora and Caleb were alone with the slow, steady heartbeat of a clock that had been waiting for them. She tried to prime the pump and failed. The handle moved easily enough, but no water came. She tried again 3 times 4 before she understood she had forgotten to pour the priming jug down the cylinder first. When she finally got it right, and the cold, sweet well water came gushing out into the tin basin, she laughed out loud, a startled, rusty sound that surprised her more than it surprised Caleb. He came running from the front room to see what had happened, and she splashed her wet hand at him, and he splashed her back. And for one suspended minute, they were a grandmother and a grandson, playing at a kitchen sink in a strange house, as if the past year had not happened, as if grief was a coat that could be hung on a hook by the door. She tried to start a fire in the wood stove and filled the kitchen with smoke. She had forgotten to open the damper. She found it finally by feel a small iron lever recessed behind the flue pipe, and when she pulled it, the draft caught, and the smoke drew up and away, and the stove began at last to warm. Caleb opened the kitchen door to let the smoke out. The cold mountain night came in. They stood in it together for a moment, looking out at the first hard stars rising above the tree line. And Caleb said very quietly, "I can see more stars here than at home." She did not say this is home now. She was not yet ready to say it. She was only ready to think it. They ate Silas's bread and cheese at the dining table by lamplight, and Nora found in a cupboard a tin of black tea so old the label had faded to ghost script. She made a pot in a kettle that had clearly been waiting on the back of the stove for a quarter century. The tea was weak but hot, and when she poured it into 2 chipped cups, she found a third cup sitting on the shelf beside the saucers turned upside down, as if someone had set it there to dry and never come back for it. She did not turn it over. She left it where it was. That night, they slept together in the small upstairs bedroom under a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and lavender and the long, patient years. The clock downstairs marked the hours. Caleb fell asleep first, his hand curled around the falcon head key, which he had asked with the gravity of a knight asking for a sword if he might hold while he slept. She had given it to him. She lay awake a long time, listening to the slow bronze breath of the house, and somewhere in the small hours, for the first time in 11 months, she did not weep before she slept. She woke to the smell of bacon. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was in her own kitchen in Raleigh, that Walter was downstairs frying breakfast, that the past 2 years had been a long bad dream from which she had finally surfaced. Then she heard the soft thunk of an iron skillet being set on the stove, and a man's quiet voice humming what might have been "Wayfaring Stranger." And she remembered everything. Silas had let himself in. He had brought eggs from his own hens, 6 brown ones, lined up in a row on the counter. He had brought a small crock of butter and a jar of last summer's blackberry preserves. He had brought a tin of coffee and a small bag of cornmeal and a wedge of yellow cheese wrapped in oil paper. He had set them on the counter without ceremony, and he was now frying 3 strips of bacon in an iron skillet he had clearly known where to find. He did not turn when she came down the stairs. He only said over his shoulder, "Coffee's in the blue pot. The boy's still sleeping. Let him." She poured a cup. She sat at the table. She watched him cook, and she understood slowly that this man was not asking to be thanked, and that thanking him would in some small way be an insult because what he was doing for someone who had died 25 years ago, and her own gratitude had not yet earned a place at the table. "How did you know her, Mr. Hawthorne?" "Silas, please." "Silas." He turned the bacon. He did not look at her. "I knew her before she was married. We were 16 years old the summer we met. She was visiting her aunt on the next ridge over. I was helping my father run a sawmill that doesn't exist anymore. We walked these woods together for one summer. Then her people sent her back to the city, and she married a man her father chose for her. And I married a girl I loved well enough, and we both lived the lives we were given. My wife passed in 1984. Marguerite's husband passed 2 years before that. She started coming up here alone in the summers. We had 30 good years as friends, just friends. The other thing was a long time ago by then, and we were not the people we had been." He plated the bacon onto a folded square of brown paper to drain. He cracked 4 of the eggs into the hot fat. "She told me the last summer she was well that she had a granddaughter she was worried about. Said you had a heart that would get you hurt. Said she was going to seal this place up and leave it for you in case the day came when you needed it. Asked me if I would keep an eye on it. I said I would. I did. For 25 years. Wasn't much to it. Walked over once a month, checked the boards, paid the road crew to keep the fire road passable in mud season. Wound the clock for the first 10 years like I told you." "That's a lot, Silas." He cracked the last egg. "It was a promise to a woman I had loved a long time. It wasn't a lot." She put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She had cried enough in the last 11 months to last her the rest of her life, she thought. Though she would prove herself wrong about this many times before the year was out. She only sat with her face in her hands and breathed in the smell of bacon and coffee and old wood smoke, and let herself be cared for by a stranger who was not it. Turned out a stranger at all. Caleb came down the stairs in his sock feet, his hair standing up at the back, the falcon head key swinging on a length of kitchen string he had somehow tied around his neck while he slept. "Mr. Silas, are those your chicken's eggs?" "They are." The brown one with the freckles laid 2 of them. "Her name is Augusta. She thinks she runs the place." Can I see her sometime? You can see her this afternoon if your grandmother says it's all right. Caleb looked at Nora. Nora looked at Silas. Silas looked at the eggs. None of them said anything else, but a thing had been agreed upon, and they all knew it. The days that followed had the strange suspended quality of convalescence. Nora worked. She pulled the dust shrouds off the furniture and shook them out over the porch rail until her arms ached. She swept floors that had not been swept in 25 years and found under the rug in the front room a trapdoor she did not yet have the courage to open. She washed windows with vinegar water and old newspaper. She aired the bedding on a clothesline Silas helped her string between two birch trees behind the cabin. She cooked simple meals from the pantry stores Silas slowly added to. A jar of his neighbor's pickled beans appeared on the porch one morning. A small sack of potatoes appeared the next. A folded paper bag containing 3 apples and a note in a woman's handwriting that read, "Only welcome" appeared on the 3rd day, and Nora never learned who had left it. Word had traveled. She had not gone into town. She had not introduced herself to anyone. But word had traveled the way it travels in mountain places by some old quiet network of porch conversations and grocery store nods. And the people of the ridge had decided without consulting her that the granddaughter of Marguerite Beaumont had come home and that she would be looked after. On the 5th day, she found the first secret. She was emptying the bottom drawer of an oak bureau in her grandmother's bedroom upstairs. The largest of the 3 bedrooms, the one she had not yet been ready to claim for herself. The drawer was full of folded linens that smelled of cedar and thyme. Beneath the linens, beneath a layer of yellow tissue, beneath a stiffened square of waxed muslin, she found a small flat wooden box no bigger than a book. Inside the box was a letter sealed with the same cracked wax she remembered. Beside the letter was a slim ledger bound in red leather. Beside the ledger was a single photograph. The photograph was old. A young Marguerite, perhaps 20, perhaps less, standing in front of a stone building Nora did not recognize, wearing a dark traveling coat and a small hat tipped at an angle that had been fashionable 100 years ago. She was not smiling, but there was something at the corner of her mouth that suggested she had been about to. The letter was addressed to Nora. "My Eleanor, if you have found this box, then you have begun to make this house your own, and you have begun to look beneath the surface of things. Good. There is more here than the boards and the locks suggest. The ledger will show you what I mean. I will not explain it. Some things must be discovered, not told. Open the panel behind the headboard of the bed in this room. The key you carry will fit a smaller lock you will find there. Go slowly, my Eleanor. You have all the time in the world now, M." She read the letter 3 times. Her hands shook in a different way now, not from cold or fear, but from a slow, stunned excitement she had not felt since she was a girl. She opened the red ledger. It was a record of accounts, pages and pages of careful columns in Marguerite's looping hand, deposits, interest, property assessments. The names of banks Nora had never heard of. A column at the back totaled in pencil in a hand that was clearly Marguerite's, much older, much frailer, dated August of 1999. The total was $412,000. She closed the ledger. She set it down on the bureau very carefully, the way one sets down a thing that might break. She walked to the bed. She slid her hands behind the heavy carved headboard. She felt along the joinery until her fingertips found a small recessed panel held by a single brass latch. She fitted the falcon head key. Behind the panel was a smaller cabinet, deeper than it should have been set into the wall itself. Inside the cabinet were oil paintings wrapped in canvas, jewelry cases of velvet so old the nap had gone shiny in places, small bags of silk that clinked when she lifted them, a leather portfolio of property deeds bound with ribbon, a bundle of stock certificates from companies whose names she half recognized from her childhood. She sat down on the floor of her grandmother's bedroom, surrounded by the careful, patient love of a woman who had been dead for 25 years, and she understood finally and fully what had been done for her. She did not weep. She had moved past weeping for the moment into a quieter country. She only sat among the treasures and let the autumn light from the bedroom window move slowly across the floor. Caleb found her there an hour later. He did not ask what the paintings were or what the velvet boxes held. He only sat down beside her on the bare floorboards and leaned his head against her shoulder. And he said, "Grandma, I think great-grandma loved you a lot." "Yes, sweetheart, I think she did." "Do you think she would have loved me too?" "I think she does, Caleb. I think she does right now." It was on the morning of the 7th day that the second knock came at the door. She was in the kitchen when she heard the vehicle. She had not heard an engine in 7 days, and the sound of it was so foreign. She thought at first it was a tree falling on the far ridge. Then she heard tires on the dirt of the drive, then the cut of an engine, then 2 doors closing in the careful synchronized way that car doors close when men are arriving who mean to be taken seriously. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked to the front of the cabin. Through the kitchen window, she saw a black sedan parked beside the woodshed and 2 men climbing the porch steps. She knew the taller one before he reached the door. Marcus had not aged well. His hair had thinned. His face had gone soft at the jaw in the way that prosperous men's faces sometimes go soft. He was wearing a tan overcoat that had cost more than her last month's rent in Raleigh. The man beside him was younger, leaner, dressed in a suit with no overcoat at all, holding a slim leather briefcase against his thigh. Marcus knocked. The knock was 3 sharp raps evenly spaced. The knock of a man who has practiced knocking on the doors of people who do not wish to see him. She opened the door. She did not invite him in. Marcus? Eleanor. He had not called her Eleanor since they were children. She watched him try out the name in his mouth and decide it suited his purposes. "This is my associate, Mr. Krell. He's an attorney. We need to talk. How did you find this place?" He glanced past her into the cabin. His eyes traveled across the cleaned floors, the polished kitchen, the kettle steaming on the wood stove. Something in him recalibrated. "My nephew posted a photograph from a school enrollment form. I have access to certain databases. It wasn't difficult." She thought of Caleb's careful, neat printing on the registration card at the small school in Asheville. She thought of the photograph the school had asked them to upload. She felt a cold thing turn over in her stomach. "What do you want, Marcus?" He produced a smile. It was the smile he had used on her since they were children. The smile that asked her to be reasonable. The smile that took for granted that being reasonable meant giving him what he wanted. "Eleanor, we need to discuss the estate." "There is no estate to discuss. Grandmother left this cabin to me." "Did she? Mr. Krell?" The attorney opened the briefcase against his knee. He withdrew a folder. He held it out to her with the practiced delicacy of a man handing over a subpoena. "Mrs. Whitfield, our review of the original probate filings from October of 1999 shows the cabin and surrounding parcel were never specifically itemized in your grandmother's recorded will. Under North Carolina intestacy provisions for unenumerated real property, the asset would have devolved to all surviving heirs in equal shares. That includes Mr. Whitfield here and the surviving children of your late aunt and uncle. By our preliminary count, you currently hold approximately 1/5 of an undivided interest in this property." She held the folder. She did not open it. She felt the porch boards under her feet and the cold mountain air on her face and the slow weight of 7 good days collapsing inward. "That isn't true. It is, Eleanor." Marcus's voice had softened now the way a hunter's voice softens at the last approach. "I don't want to be unkind. I know what you've been through. But you can't just walk into a forgotten cabin and claim it. There are processes. There are records. We're prepared to file a partition action by Friday. Or you can do this the easy way. We sell the parcel. The buyer is already lined up. You take your share. You find a small apartment somewhere and you and the boy get on with your lives. It's the responsible thing." He looked past her again into the cabin, into the warm yellow light of the kitchen lamp she had lit against the gray morning. His eyes touched the trap door under the rug she had not yet opened. His eyes touched the closed door of the upstairs bedroom. where $400,000 in paintings and jewelry sat in a hidden cabinet behind a headboard. His eyes touched last the slow bronze pendulum of the clock that had been waiting for her since before either of them was born. He had no way of knowing what was in this house. He only knew that Marguerite had hidden it, and that anything hidden was worth taking. Friday Eleanor. He touched the brim of an invisible hat in cruel parody of the gesture Silas had made on the first night. He and the attorney walked back to the black sedan. The engine started. The tires turned on the dirt. The sound of them faded down the fire road until the woods absorbed it, and there was only the wind in the high pines and the slow, steady heartbeat of the clock. Nora stood on the porch with the folder in her hand and did not move for a long time. Behind her in the doorway, Caleb's small, clear voice. "Grandma, who was that man?" She did not turn. She could not yet let him see her face. "That was my brother, sweetheart. That was your great-uncle Marcus." "What did he want?" She looked down at the folder. She looked out at the empty drive where the black sedan had been. She looked up at the sky where a single hawk was riding a thermal in slow, patient circles the way hawks have ridden these ridges for 10,000 years. "He wants to take this house away from us, Caleb. Can he?" She closed her hand around the folder until the paper crumpled. She felt somewhere beneath the cold the first small hard ember of something she had not felt in 11 months. Not grief, not fear. Something older, something that belonged to her grandmother and her great-grandmother and to every woman in the long line behind her who had crossed an ocean with a falcon head key in her pocket and refused to be broken by what waited on the other side. "He can try, sweetheart. He can certainly try." From inside the cabin, the clock began to strike the hour, 10 slow bronze notes each one settling into the next, each one carrying across the clearing and into the trees, and out she imagined across the whole ridge, where a quiet old man on the next hill would be hearing them too, and would already be reaching for his coat. She turned away from the empty drive and walked back into the cabin, and she set the folder on the dining table beside the cooling teapot, and she did not open it. She had read enough subpoenas and threatening letters in the last year to know that the first thing a frightened person does is read them again and again, looking for a loophole the writer did not put there. She would not do that. She would think instead. She lit a second lamp. The morning had gone gray. A weather was moving in off the high ridges. Caleb sat at the table across from her, with his small hands folded around a mug of cocoa Silas had left tinned in the pantry, and he watched her face with the quiet patience of a child who has learned to read the weather of adults. "Caleb, I need you to listen to me." "Yes, Grandma. What that man said about this house not being ours, I don't believe it. Your great-grandmother was a very careful woman. She did not leave loose ends. There is something we have not found yet." "Where do we look?" She thought of the trap door under the front room rug she had not yet opened. She thought of the smaller upstairs closet she had not yet emptied. She thought of the red ledger and the panel behind the headboard. She thought last of the man chopping wood over the ridge to the east. First we asked Mr. Silas. He knew her longer than anyone living. She put the lamp in the kitchen window the way Silas had instructed on the first night. She did not know if he would see it through the rising mist. She did not know if a lit window in daylight would even register as a signal. She lit it anyway because it was the only thing she knew how to do. He came within the hour. He had a small canvas pack over one shoulder and a folded oilcloth slicker over his arm. He stamped his boots on the porch and stepped inside and looked once at the folder on the table and once at Nora's face, and he understood everything without being told. "How long do we have?" "Friday, 4 days." He set the pack down on the bench beside the door. He sat at the table without being invited and poured himself a cup of cold tea from the pot. And he drank it the way a man drinks who has done difficult work before and intends to do it again. "Your grandmother kept a lawyer in Asheville. Name was Reeves, Edward Reeves. He drew up most of her late papers. He passed about 6 years back, but his daughter took over the practice. Tabitha. She'd be about your age now. If anyone has the originals filed somewhere your brother can't reach, it's her. Originals of what? He looked at her over the rim of the cup. Your grandmother had me drive her into Asheville one afternoon in the summer of '99. She would not tell me why. She went into the law office alone. She came out 2 hours later with an envelope she made me promise never to open, and she made me sign a paper saying I had witnessed her signing whatever was inside. I signed. I drove her home. She put the envelope in a safe deposit box at the old Farmers and Merchants Bank, which is now the Asheville branch of First Carolina. The box was paid up for 50 years in advance. She showed me the receipt. I have kept the key for 25 years. He reached into the pocket of his canvas coat and produced a small flat brass key longer than a house key, but slimmer than the falcon head attached to a leather fob, darkened by years of being carried against a man's hip. She stared at it. Why didn't you give this to me on the first day? Because she told me not to. She told me to wait until you needed it. She said you would have to live in this house at least a few days before you would understand what was being given to you. She said a person who does not understand a gift cannot defend it. He set the key on the table between them. You understand it now, Eleanor. Yes, I understand it now. The drive into Asheville the next morning took an hour and 10 minutes in Silas's old green pickup truck. Caleb sat between them on the bench seat, his legs not quite long enough to reach the floor. His hand closed around the falcon head key on its kitchen string. The truck smelled of pipe tobacco and motor oil and the faint sweet ghost of hay. The radio did not work. None of them spoke much. Tabitha Reeves's office occupied the second floor of a narrow brick building on a side street off Pack Square. The stairs creaked. The door bore a small brass plaque that read, Reeves and Reeves Attorneys established 1962, and Nora understood, climbing those stairs, that she was walking into a place her grandmother had walked into 25 years ago, carrying the future of a granddaughter, who was then a young woman of 23 with no idea what the world was preparing for her. Tabitha was a woman of 45 with iron-gray hair cut short and reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead. She listened to Nora's account of the previous morning without interrupting. She took the safe deposit key. She made a single phone call to the bank manager 3 blocks away. She put on her coat. The safe deposit box was the size of a hat box. Inside was a single manila envelope sealed with red wax addressed in Marguerite's looping hand, to the granddaughter of Marguerite Beaumont, to be opened with counsel. Tabitha opened it on the conference table back at her office. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a deed properly recorded dated August 14th, 1999, conveying the cabin and the surrounding 31 acres of Hawthorne Ridge from Marguerite Beaumont to Eleanor Whitfield, sole grantee, with a notarized witness signature. Beneath that read, Silas Hawthorne. The second was a notarized will codicil specifying that all personal property contained within the structure at the time of conveyance was likewise transferred to the same grantee, with no reservation of rights for any other heir. The third was a trust instrument establishing the Marguerite Beaumont Family Trust, with one named beneficiary, Eleanor Whitfield, and a successor beneficiary, any minor child in her care. The trust held as of its last statement 6 months ago the sum of $431,000. Tabitha read all 3 documents twice. She took her glasses off. She set them on the table. Mrs. Whitfield, your brother has no claim. He has never had a claim. The cabin was conveyed inter vivos 25 years ago. It never entered the probate estate. The personal property is yours by separate instrument. The trust is yours by name, and your grandson is the successor. Whatever Mr. Krell told you yesterday was either ignorant or dishonest, and I am inclined to believe it was the second. Nora sat very still. She could feel Caleb's small, warm shoulder against her arm. She could feel Silas's quiet attention from the chair beside her. What do we do? Tabitha smiled. It was a small, precise smile, the smile of a woman who had been waiting a long time to use a certain set of papers. We filed the original deed with the county registrar this afternoon, which I should have been able to do 25 years ago if your grandmother had not asked me to wait. We send a certified copy to Mr. Krell's office by courier before close of business. And then, Mrs. Whitfield, we wait for your brother to call you, which he will, because men like your brother always call when the ground gives way beneath them. When he calls, you may say whatever you wish. I would advise mercy. But that is not legal advice. The call came on Thursday evening, the day before Marcus's threatened filing. She took it on the kitchen phone. She had paid the small mountain cooperative to reconnect 3 days before. She had been mending a tear in Caleb's school coat by the lamp. The receiver was cold against her ear. Eleanor. Marcus. There was a long silence. She heard him breathing. She heard distantly a television in his house and a woman's voice saying something to him from another room. I didn't know. You didn't ask, Krell said. Krell said the records were incomplete. He said it was standard. Marcus, you drove 3 hours into the mountains to take a house from your sister and her grandson. Whatever Krell said, that drive was yours. Another silence. Longer. Eleanor, I have not been a good brother to you. No, you have not. She let the words sit. She did not soften them. She had spent 58 years softening words for the comfort of men who would not have softened theirs for her. And she was finished with it. But she was not finished with him. That was the difference. That was what her grandmother had been trying to teach her across a span of 25 years and $431,000 and a brass key shaped like a falcon. A soft heart was not the same as a weak one. A soft heart could refuse and forgive in the same breath. A soft heart could close a door and leave a window open beside it. Marcus, listen to me. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to report your attorney to the bar, though Miss Reeves tells me I could. I'm going to send you something instead. You will receive an envelope in the next 2 weeks. Inside the envelope will be a check for $10,000 and a letter. The check is not because you deserve it. The check is because grandmother told me in a letter. I am only now beginning to understand that kindness is not weakness, and that I would have to learn the difference before I was finished. I am learning it tonight. I am learning it by writing you a check I do not owe you, and by telling you plainly that you will never set foot on this land again. Do you understand me, Marcus? He was crying. She could hear it. She had not heard her brother cry since they were children, and she found she had no feeling about it one way or the other. That was something to consider later. That was not for tonight. I understand, Eleanor. Good. She hung up the phone. She sat at the kitchen table with the mended coat across her lap and listened to the clock in the front room strike the half hour. Caleb came in from the porch where he had been feeding the cat that had appeared on the second day and was now apparently theirs. He looked at her face. Grandma, are you all right? Yes, sweetheart, I am all right. Was that the man from before? Yes, he will not come back. He climbed into the chair beside her and laid his head against her shoulder. She smelled the cold mountain night in his hair and the wood smoke from the porch and the small sweet animal smell of his scalp, which had not changed since he was an infant in her arms. She closed her eyes and rested her cheek on the top of his head. Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything. When I grow up, can I be the kind of person who has a house like this that other people can come to? She had to wait a moment before she could answer. Yes, Caleb. That is exactly the kind of person you can be. I am going to spend the rest of my life helping you become him. The winter came slowly to the ridge that year. The first hard frost held off until the second week of November. The first snow did not fall until the day after Thanksgiving, which Nora and Caleb spent at Silas's small clean cabin over the ridge, eating a turkey he had raised himself and biscuits Nora had learned to make from a recipe card she had found tucked into a cookbook in her grandmother's pantry. The card was in Marguerite's handwriting. It read simply, "Biscuits. For the granddaughter when she comes." It was on the morning after that first snow with the world gone white and silent. and the chimney pulling hard against a clear, cold sky, that Silas brought her the last thing. He arrived just after breakfast. He carried a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. He set it on the kitchen table without ceremony. He sat across from her and folded his hands. "There is one more thing your grandmother asked me to give you. She said to wait until you had been here long enough that you were not afraid of the house anymore. I think you are not afraid of it anymore." "No, I am not afraid of it anymore." "Then open it." Inside the box was a leather album of photographs. Some she had seen before in the strong box upstairs. Most she had not. They were old. The oldest showed a young man in a high-collared shirt, perhaps 25, standing beside a woman Nora recognized as her great-grandmother, on a porch she did not recognize. The young man had eyes the color of river ice. She looked up at Silas. He was looking at his hands. "My father, he was your great-grandmother's brother." The kitchen tilted very slightly. She set the album down on the table. "Silas, I'm your grandmother's cousin Eleanor. First cousin. Our fathers were brothers. We grew up on neighboring farms. That was how we knew each other at 16. We could not marry. The family would not have permitted it. That was part of why she was sent away. The other part was that she wanted to go. She had ambitions I did not have. She wanted a city and a husband who could give her one. I wanted these mountains. We made the choices we made. You are my cousin." "I am your second cousin. By blood. Yes? All this time. All this time." He looked up at her. His river ice eyes were wet, but he was not crying. He was past the place where men of his generation cried over things that had happened a long time ago. "She made me promise not to tell you while she was alive. After she passed, she made me promise not to tell you until you had stayed long enough, that the telling would feel like a gift and not an obligation. I have kept both promises. I am keeping the second one this morning. You are my family, Eleanor. The boy is my family. I have no children of my own. I have no one else. If you will have me, I would like to be his great uncle. I would like to teach him to split wood and to read the weather of the ridges and to know which mushrooms in these woods will feed a man and which will kill him. I would like that very much." She crossed the kitchen and put her arms around him. He was thin under his flannel shirt, thinner than she had realized an old man's body kept upright by stubbornness and good work. He smelled of wood smoke and pipe tobacco and the cold morning air he had walked through to reach her. He held her stiffly for a moment, the way a man holds a thing he is not sure he is allowed to keep. And then he held her properly, and he wept after all. And so did she. And it was a different kind of weeping than any she had done in her life before. Caleb came in from the front room. He stood in the doorway and looked at the two of them. "Mr. Silas, are you crying?" "Yes, son, I am." "Why?" Silas wiped his face with the back of one hand. He looked at the boy a long time. "Because I have been alone in these mountains a long time, and I am not alone anymore." Caleb considered this with the gravity he gave to all important questions. Then he walked across the kitchen and put his small hand in Silas's large weathered one, and he said with the simplicity of a child who has already decided, "You can come live with us. There are 3 bedrooms." The spring came. The snowmelt ran high in the creek behind the cabin. Nora planted lavender in the bed her grandmother had marked on a hand-drawn garden plan she had found folded inside the cookbook. She planted tomatoes and beans and a row of sunflowers that would be taller than Caleb by August. She and Tabitha Reeves filed the papers, establishing the Marguerite Beaumont Foundation, which would award small unrestricted grants to grandparents raising grandchildren in the southern Appalachians. No application required beyond a letter. No repayment expected. No questions asked beyond the ones a person wanted to answer. The first grant went out in April, the second in May. By the end of the first year, there would be 31 of them, and Nora would know every name. Silas did not move into the cabin. He kept his own small place over the ridge because a man of 72 does not change his habits. But he came for breakfast most mornings and for supper most nights. And Caleb learned to split kindling and to identify a morel mushroom and to know the difference between a red-tailed hawk and a Cooper's hawk by the shape of the wing against the sky. On an evening in later May, with the lavender beginning to flower and the long blue dusk coming down over the ridges, Nora sat in her grandmother's rocking chair on the front porch with the falcon head key resting in her open palm. The brass had been polished by a year of being carried. The green glass eyes caught the last of the light. Inside the cabin behind her, the slow bronze pendulum kept its long, patient measure. Beside her on the porch step, Caleb leaned against Silas's knee and listened to the old man name the first stars as they came out one by one over the eastern ridge. She closed her hand around the key. She thought about how many doors it had opened. The padlocks on the porch, the front door, the panel behind the headboard, the safe deposit box in Asheville. The locked place inside her own chest she had not known how to open, until a woman who had been dead for 25 years had pressed a brass falcon into her hand and asked her to wait. There are doors in every life that will not open until you have lost everything else you were holding. There are gifts that cannot be received until the hands that would have held them have been emptied. There are loves that wait across spans of years longer than a single life carried by patient people who do not ask to be thanked, kept warm in sealed houses by clocks that should not still be running and by promises that should not still be kept, and yet are and yet do and yet are kept. The first star was bright now over the ridge. The lavender smelled of evenings that had not yet happened. The boy laughed at something the old man had said. The clock inside marked the hour. If you have ever been given a gift across a span of years longer than you knew was possible by someone you thought you had lost, tell us about it in the comments below. Tell us their name. Tell us what they left you. We will read everyone. Sleep well tonight, friends. The doors that are meant to open for you will open in their own time. The keys you are carrying have not been forgotten, and the people who loved you the truest of them are loving you still from wherever they are in the quiet, patient way that the best love has always traveled across the years, across the dark, across every door that has ever been sealed against the world. Good night.
Ja, ist schon Nest oben drin. Fuck. Ist schon durch.
30 seconds left.
Eine heißt Nest auf jeden Fall nicht meine dann.
Menti.
Wann die und die treffen bei Markus. Die und die bei mir. Wie sag ich euch das am besten? Das wird eine ganz schwierige Kiste. Meine Wohnung ist nicht groß. Aber wir können es bei May machen. Die wohnt ja auch hier. D&D treffen bei May, dann können wir auslagern.